Hi YouTube, welcome to another video with the aviation enthusiast on 50 Airwaysim tips. So this is the fourth installment in a series of 5 videos where I'll be taking through 50 Airwaysim tips for new beginners or even advanced players might see a few tips that might be useful for them. If you haven't seen the first 3 videos, just follow the links and you will see the other 3 videos. I would advise to kind of watch these series in order so you get a list of all the tips that I've shared so far, because I sometimes reference back to them in these videos. It's worth checking the initial tips and follow this in order. So the first tip I'm going to share today is tip number 31, and it comes to insurance. So there is a section in Airwaysim that covers insurance. Especially when you have own aircraft, there's 3 types of insurance you can get. I would say always pick the cheapest, do not change anything, because in my 10 years of experience of playing Airwaysim, there has never been a single hull loss in Airwaysim. Nobody has ever lost an aircraft as far as I know in playing this game, so do not pay more if you don't need to. It's just simply no point until Sammy does decide to change something to the game dynamics where people start to lose airframes. I wouldn't pay anything more, and for leased aircraft there's only one setting, so you can't choose it. So at the moment, air insurance in Airwaysim, do not spend a dime more than what you need. Point 32. What we've noticed in every year, we see in February there seems to be a dip in profits, and we expect that's related to how the game calculations are done in the background. I believe a lot of the calculations are set as per month and then allocated to the weeks. But what we're seeing is obviously February is a shorter month, but those costs maintain the same. So typically you'll see that the cost base relatively to your income is quite high, and sometimes, well, usually that leads to a deduction in terms of your profits and your margins, and you'll see a little squeeze in February. And typically around February, March, because of this, we also tend to see a spike in bankruptcies for those airlines who have been tight on cash, not running high margins, and then they see the squeeze even further in February. See it happen year and year again. So do expect a dip in profit. Sometimes it can make sure that when it comes to January and you have some cash, maybe hold off till March to place that aircraft order that you want to do, just to ride out that dip in profits if your profits aren't very high. So manage your cash accordingly if you're not making the biggest amount of profit, especially when you're close to February. Next point is how should you supply the routes. So if you're in a strength of position, like a leading position in your base, always fill up the demand at least 100%, often oversupply 130 150% of the demand, especially early in the games, because the demands will grow. There's 2 reasons why you should oversupply. One is to discourage competitors from adding more flights in there as well, but also as I just mentioned, demand grows over time, so you don't have to go back and forth all the time adding flights already. It's already done by oversupplying. Now I mentioned this is only important to do when you're in a leading position, because otherwise, you're just hemorrhaging cash. This is more like part of later in the game, not necessarily at the beginning. But make sure that you fill up the demands, regardless of what the competitors are doing. Keep an eye on the frequency, as previously mentioned. But yeah, do not be scared of like, oh, I can only add 1 flight, because that means then the total supply is done. Completed for that route, because the competitors are flying 3 times and they take about 80%. No, just go for it is my advice, and just keep that frequency in mind and just squeeze the competitors out as well. Point number 34 is have configurations on your aircraft that actually work for you. So depending on where you fly, make sure that the aircraft configurations make sense. In early game worlds, like especially in like the jet age era, early in the game, you'll find most aircrafts are high density seating, and those work for the first few years. But over time, you will need to move into standard density, especially if your competitors are starting to do that, because they will start to take passengers away from you. Now, premium seating configurations are typically not needed. Maybe you want to do in some of the the business class or the first class seating, especially on longer haul flights over 4.5 5,000 nautical miles. It may be considered beneficial to go for a premium seating, but otherwise I would just keep it into terms of standard density seating. And make sure that aircraft configuration works for you. Like if you're in Heathrow, for example, where you have tons of premium demand, do not fly just the default fleet type. Make it according to the routes that you're flying, make them match. So if there's a lot of premium demand in first or business, have a configuration that has quite a significant amount of business and first class seats. Just make sure that you never have your calculation of business and first can't be more than the economy. So if you add on the business passengers plus the first class passenger seats, it can't have more than the economy seats. So you can't just fly a whole configuration in first class seats, for example. I think the Concorde may be an exemption on that, but I wouldn't advise flying the Concorde in this game anyway. So yeah, make sure, in summary, is to have the configuration that work for your base and for the routes you fly. So no key timings in the game is the next point. There's a few elements that are linked to here. So you have, I did mention that Airwaysim is not a real life simulation, but certain events that happen in real life are simulated in this simulation. So one of them is, for example, 9/11. We all know when that happened, so you will see a decrease in passengers around then. But also you have like the 70s and 80s fuel crisis, so you expect a big spike in fuel pricing. And also as the game moves on, you need to understand when certain fleet times will get too small warnings. So these are warnings that on certain routes, the distance that you're flying and the plane that you've chosen to fly is too small. Passenger prefers bigger aircrafts, and it will start to have a penalty in terms of your load factors. So this is a dynamic to make sure that people do fly bigger aircraft, so they just don't spam the frequency. And at certain key times, you will find that aircraft types of a certain size will start to get too small warnings on certain long distance routes, and this depends on the distance and also the demand of the route. And if both you and your competitors are flying the same type, then it doesn't matter. But as soon as one of the competitors start flying a bigger aircraft and there is a too small warning on you, you will start to see that penalty. So make sure you are aware of these timings by fleet type when it happens. And generally, you can ask for advice in alliances. People who've been playing the game for many years, they will know certain fleet types when too small warnings kick in. Many people won't, but it's part of the learning curve, and that's why we do recommend being part of an alliance when you can have those type of discussions. Now, when we go to the next step, it's when should I fly a prop versus a jet? So you got to understand which one of the two is likely to come on top, and this pretty much depends on the distance flown and also the demand. So if you have a route that's below 750 nautical miles and you have an ADR, for example, flying that route, that will do generally well, unless you need to start having more than 8 of them to fill the whole of the demand. So when it comes to frequency, if you need more than 8 ATR, so if passengers are more than 500, I would start to recommend flying jets. If not, the propeller planes are very good on short hops. The fuel burn is much lower and the profitability can be very lucrative. So you got to understand that limit and see. You don't want to fly an ATR on a route with thousands of passenger demand. It just does not make sense. You want to make sure you have that bigger aircraft type on there. When you have own passenger aircraft, typically I would recommend flying them until you have the third D check, so around 24, 25 years age. That's also when they start to become nearly fully depreciated. You will find that they tend to be fully depreciated just after between 25 and 26 years old. But when you do the third D check, you would actually have a huge D check cost, which will get then depreciated at a very high rate. So in the next year they would get they would show as loss running from an income statement perspective, but in reality that's just a cash adjustment that's happening because you've paid for that D check up front. Sometimes if it's a fleet type that you can convert into a cargo, then it might still be worth to convert into a cargo aircraft, but typically I personally fly my aircraft until they're till the third D check if I own them, and then I just move on. If it's later in the game and I make tons of cash, I might even fly them till beyond third D check, but a third D check is generally quite expensive and takes quite a lot of time to recover in terms of the cost, but it's your preference. See how the state of your airline is, but yeah, this would be my advice. Next one is to explain how airport slot increases work. So airport slots, they do increase, but there seems to be two dynamics that are in play. So in the beginning of the game world, Sammy artificially sets the slots quite low and increases these over the first 18 to 24 months of the game world. They will start to go up, and eventually it will just stop, and it's linked to the infrastructure level of your airport. Now I've seen it's a multiplication of your infrastructure level. So the game mode I've been playing lately is Speedy Recovery, where my infrastructure level is 5 and it's now capped at 75 slots per hour. That means that there's a multiplication factor of 15. What happens is when my infrastructure level increases to level 6, I can expect an additional 15 slots to increase. Now you can quickly determine what the factor is when your slots stop to increase. In different game modes I've had a multiplication factor of 20, so when it was infrastructure 5 I had 100 slots, and you will see the slot increases over time as your infrastructure level increases. Now the infrastructure level tends to increase when slots start to become more scarce and people are flying and it's a busy airport. Then you will see that the infrastructure will increase, and that's how to generate more slots. But if you're in a busy airport and when the slots do increase, you're likely going to see a restriction that you can only buy 50 new slots per every 5 game days or every 7 game days. So you will see that restriction will be in place, which can be quite annoying, but that tends to disappear over time. Typically after 24 to 48 hours in real life that will disappear, but that's just to make sure that everybody gets a chance to get slots, because historically before this was implemented, slots appeared and the stronger players would just hoover up all the slots, and then people who haven't logged on, they would miss out on the opportunity to grow again. So this is kind of the reason behind why that's in place. Number 39, aircraft production rate. So for new aircrafts, every single aircraft has a production rate and how quickly they manufacture them. Now occasionally on busy production lines you will see that the speed will vary up and down, but this doesn't happen very often. So you would typically on an Airbus A320 for example, or the popular fleet types, when people have thousands and thousands of orders, you will see an increase in production rate. My advice is if you're early on if it's a new aircraft type, and this is like one, for example, I mentioned the Airbus A320, which lots of players are going to ultimately want to operate. If you have loads of aircrafts on order before the production rate increases, it can be a very wise move, because once the production rate increases, you will see that suddenly a lot of your orders that you've already placed will shorten in delivery time, so you'll get them a lot quicker than you would otherwise. So you want to get in there before that rate increases. It's something the system decides when happens. It's not something that's visible or gets announced when it happens, so you have to go in and check, but it does happen. And vice versa, it can also decrease if there is lack of demand on the aircraft production, and eventually the aircraft production will stop as well. But they do happen, but they are quite rare, and it depends on the popularity of the aircraft that's being ordered. And point number 40, I can't actually emphasize point 40 enough, is if you are serious about this game, join an alliance which has an active community. Many of the alliances will have an active chat channel. You can learn the best from other people. I've personally been in a few alliances before I set up my own alliance, and we've built an active community. On a daily basis we chat on our own chat channel. I've had the joy of meeting people in person actually, and built a real community spirit and helping other players. But you continuously have that discussion to learn and keep on top with game changes. So they'll make you aware, there's been some change in the game, have you seen this in the forum, and point out certain things. So joining an alliance is invaluable, not only because of your learning, but also you will see good alliances that will help each other out when it comes to aircraft ordering. So strong airlines who are not necessarily flying the same fleet types, they will order airplanes for each other and then sell them privately amongst each other, and that's kind of another benefit of being in an alliance. So yes, if join one of the leading alliances if you can, and actively participate would be my advice if you want to get the best out of Airwaysim. Again, thank you for watching this video. As always, if you've got any questions, just leave a comment below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to follow for the rest of the videos. So this was the fourth one. There'll be one more coming. Keep an eye out for that, and hope you enjoyed today's video. Cheers, bye.